I find the pendulum to be a fantastic tool. The more you practice, the more clear the answers come and the more accuracy you generally have and the more excited you get. And that is what I love about watching my class participants. In the beginning, they're like, this thing isn't going to move. Oh my gosh, it's moving. And then they start to get the answers. And then they check their, because I teach them how to check your accuracy for the answers. And it's a thrill.
Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show, where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. Today, we have intuitive channel Stephanie Banks with us to discuss the art of channeling, mediumship, and how you can develop your intuitive abilities. So join us and get ready to expand your mind and open your heart on the Ask Julie Ryan Show. Oh, and remember to subscribe, comment, and share this episode with all your family and friends. Stephanie, so wonderful to have you. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
You bet. Let's just get right into it. What's a channel? What's a psychic medium channel?
Well, I will eliminate the psychic part of it because that's not how I define my work, but I do define myself as an intuitive channel. And to me, that simply means that I am connecting to divine energy and wisdom, oftentimes through the soul perspective, to bring through messages that support us in this thrilling, exciting, beautiful journey that we're having here in this three-dimensional world.
Well said. Have you been able to do this since you were a kid, or did you learn how to do it?
I learned how to do it. I think all children are very intuitive and very connected. And then through that process of conditioning, right, and whatever hangups we have about spirituality or our beliefs around that, it can kind of be dampened, or we can be discouraged from making that type of connection. That's not necessarily what happened to me. I've just seen that and heard a lot about that from clients of mine who are highly spiritually connected and intuitive. But I always felt, I always talked to animals. I always talked to trees. I always heard them talk back to me. And,
what did they say?
Yeah.
What they have to say?
Loving things, beautiful things like, have a good day at school, honey.
A tree said that to you?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I love that.
For those of us that feel very connected to the natural world, this is not uncommon. We do have these beautiful conversations, and they're not through sound waves like you and I are speaking. It's through heart-centered communication, and it's a powerful, incredibly beautiful way to communicate. So I always felt that type of connection. It was only in my adulthood that I learned what intuitive channeling was, because my best friend was a professional intuitive channel, and I'd never heard of it before I met her. And then I needed to figure out a way to stay connected with my mother, who had dementia, that would transcend traditional communication so I could still know how to support her and what she needed from me and what our relationship was really destined to hold. And so my friend channeled my mom for me. And when I saw what that did for that relationship, I knew I had to learn to do it for myself.
I learned how to do all this woo-woo stuff too. I didn't have dead people chasing me since childhood, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information. But a couple of thoughts came into my mind when you were talking about talking to trees and pets and all of that. And then we'll piggyback on your mom. There was a children's show, certainly Captain Kangaroo, I watched. You probably are, I'm older than you, so I don't know if you remember Captain Kangaroo. And then there was and I think he had a talking tree, if I remember correctly. But the other thing is, there was when I used to go visit my grandmother, because in my early childhood, from like 3 to 10, I didn't live in Columbus, Ohio. I lived closer up to Cleveland. And I'd go visit my Meemaw, and there was a kids show called Lucy's Toy Shop that was a local CBS affiliate production, and they had a tree that spoke as well. So I'm thinking, okay, there are way more than you and I that have been talking to trees, because these people that are writing these, especially children's shows, do that, number one. And number two, I do that all the time for clients when they have a loved one who isn't able to communicate themselves. And most of the time, it's somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's, and we can communicate with them and get information with them, between them and for them and all of that. And it is so helpful. So I understand what you're talking about with that. I
Yeah.
love it. Who did you tell about that when you were little? Did you tell your friends or your family or
About the
anybody
trees talking to me?
about the trees and the pets?
No, I had no reason to chat with anyone about it. I had the trees to talk to.
Yeah.
So I think I probably assumed that we all talked to plants, trees, and animals in our own way. So it didn't occur to me that this was something out of the ordinary to share with someone as like a great reveal of some sort. It was just a beautiful exchange. I had this special tree in one of my childhood homes outside out front. So when I would wait for a carpool pickup, I would have this extra time and just really feel very connected to her. And I really felt just beautiful well-being and goodwill and love and pure energy coming from the tree. And sometimes I would share what was hard for me. Sometimes it was a struggle with a friend or someone in the class, and I would just feel wisdom coming through. And so it was just a very natural, beautiful part of my growing up that I don't think I shared with anyone else. And I'm from Cleveland too.
You are? What part?
Beechwood area.
Oh, yeah. John Carroll. Yeah, I know it. Beechwood Mall. I know it well. Yeah. Okay. Well, interestingly enough, the whole bit about children knowing how to do this, every child knows how to do this. We all come in with the hardware. Sounds like you feel the same way as I on that. And that's why I wrote my children's book series, my Angel Messages series. There's 4 books, Angel Messages for kids, for dogs, for cats, and for truth. And it's because there were so many mothers and grandmothers that said to me, can you please help me explain, how does my child know this information about my deceased loved one who was dead before they were born, and this child can't read yet? And, how do they know this stuff? That is true. How does my child know about past lives? And we can get information that we can corroborate with online historical documents. And this kid doesn't know how to use the internet, they're reading Hop on Pop. And then the last one is when somebody dies, how do we explain to them what happens? Because we'll say, well, honey, grandma's in heaven. And the 3-year-old will say, no, she's not. She's asleep in that box up in the front of the room, because they're at the funeral home, for the visitation, for the wake. And so I completely agree with you on that. Interestingly enough, too, as I mentioned before we started recording, I was traveling last weekend. And on the plane, I was reading a book about this woman who went in search of fairies in Ireland, Wales, Scotland, where the Celts, that whole Celts territory, and the trees play a huge role in that. And I know when I go for a walk in the botanical garden that it feeds my soul because of all the trees there. The flowers are great, but it's the trees. What do you think's going on with that? What, first of all, the fairies, and secondly, what is it about the energy that we feel when we're in a forest or we're walking through an area that has a lot of big old trees?
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But I just know how it feels. And with regards to the fairies, it's fun for me because I often will have clients who are fairies. And, you can feel the essence of that light energy. And so when we channel and they learn that they're of that realm, it's very exciting to them. It's very affirming of how they have experienced the world thus far. Because many of us are not, I'd say the majority of us are not of the fairy realm. So,
yeah.
But I love that someone is going in search of those beings in Ireland. I can't wait to read and learn more about it. I experience the fairy energy as of course within the forests, and very, very light and joyful and also captivating. That's how I would describe it. And then in terms of what we experience in the forest, there is some a wonderful research out there about the benefits of forest bathing and connecting to trees. And they've studied meditators who meditate with their backs up against a tree, and they will hook the meditator up to electrodes, and they will hook the tree up to measure the xylem and phloem, that is, the fluids moving up and down within the tree. And with practice and continuing meditation, the breath of the meditator starts to match up with, or perhaps it's reverse, the flow of the tree. So this is how interconnected we are. It's profound, it's exquisite, it's beautiful. And then my favorite book is behind me on my shelf somewhere by Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolin, and it's Like a Tree. And she talks about the power of tree people, those of us who connect.
Sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings, Frodo,
Well, you're a tree person, I'm a tree person, right?
Yeah.
Just those of us who recognize the beauty and the energy of trees coming together to save the planet, because of course we are gone without trees. There is no life that can be supported without trees here. So I find that to be something of an urgency as well. We got to come back to our nature. We got to come back to what the trees have to share with us, the wisdom that they pass back and forth to each other. They communicate with each other underneath the surface of the earth. They
From their
warn
roots.
each other, of dangers, of pests. They support each other with sugars and carbon. It's amazing if you read about trees.
Well, one more thing about trees, and then I have pages of questions for you, girl. So, University of Alabama is close to where I live in Birmingham, and my son graduated from there, and I was a volunteer sorority advisor there for 12 years. And they have these massive old magnolias. I mean, like gone with the wind, massive. These magnolias are hundreds and hundreds of years old. And during the Civil War, when those damn Yankees came down, you and I, damn Yankees, right? They torched the university. The president's house was the only thing left. And then there was one other small building. And one time I was over there and I was admiring those trees. I was driving by them. They're in this kind of open area. And I thought, my God, if those trees could talk about what happened during that Civil War battle, because that was a Civil War training camp. So, of course, the Yankees came in and really attacked it and burned it down. But I thought, well, duh, Ryan, you can talk to the trees, ask them. And so I got a lot of information from them on that. And then I was able to validate it with historic documentation. It was fascinating. Just beautiful. And those old Southern magnolias, and I have a bunch of them. We planted a bunch of them in my garden when we moved in here. And they're so quintessential South. And the stories they can tell, like the redwoods, there's certain trees that are in different parts of the U.S. and throughout the world, I find fascinating. What are the stories that they can tell that are basically going to surround their area, and what wisdom can they share? That would be a great book, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Talking to the trees of the world.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I have a client whose job it is to take trees that have been felled it's the LA area, actually, and he brings them into his workshop and he transforms them into beautiful pieces of furniture or something of that nature and puts them back into public spheres. And so it's like this journey of honoring this tree's life and the stories that it has to tell, and placing it back into the center of town where it grew, where the people gathered, where there have been sacred things occurring, historically speaking. And so, they have beautiful stories to tell. And it's wonderful when we can be present to those and be witness to that.
I was in Biloxi, Mississippi a couple of years ago, and they had a really big hurricane blow through, and it toppled a bunch of the magnolias and broke them off. And an artist came in and made sculptures out of the trunks that were remaining, and they are exquisite. And I thought, I didn't think about them, continuing on with their story, but that makes tons of sense. Wow, interesting. Okay, let's switch gears. So obviously we're both tree people. I love that. So we're tree people. Do you come from a spiritual family? Tell us about how you grew up. And you said you just started talking to the trees and the animals, but have you, since you've become an adult, found that you have parents or grandparents or siblings or cousins that are doing this as well, or are you an outlier?
I'm probably an outlier. I mean, I don't know enough really far back in my lineage to say that there isn't anyone that has done what I'm doing. So that's entirely possible. But I just a traditional Jewish household, basically. Not anything that I would call highly religious, but we did a practice, and we went to synagogue and we attended services on the high holy days. But no, there wasn't anyone in my family that was connected in this way that was like a role model for me. It really was something that came about through a need in my adulthood to have a different option for communication.
Okay. I find that interesting. I'm the same way. I don't know of anybody in my family. And so it took extra golden ovary courage for you and for me to come out of the closet with the family, right? Let alone with everybody else. And I thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then we're right so many times at the beginning that they have to stop and think, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. And now my older brother will call me if he needs something and he'll just say, do your thing.
Yeah.
Ah, goodness. Okay. You talk about the right brain and the left brain. Please tell us your understanding of the difference. And do you use both sides when you're channeling? Does one side work more than the other? Are they a balancing act? What's going on there?
Yeah. So they are intended to work together. That's why they're connected with this tissue called the corpus callosum. And the left brain is our logical, problem-solving, linear thinking orientation. That is very, very highly valued in society. I would venture to say many, many societies, if not most. So what we have here in the Western world is a very highly developed left hemisphere and a lesser developed right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is creative, expansive, intuitive, spiritual in terms of how we can connect. And so when that's underdeveloped, we don't even know that this is something available to all. Like what I do in channeling, anyone can learn. I'm very clear about this. If you have a desire to hone this, you can. If you'll put in the practice and the work, you can get clarity. You can be accurate. You can really develop this craft. I know because I did it, and there's nothing unique to my right hemisphere that I know about that is different from anybody else's. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
So I kind of envision us getting to the place where we are working to develop this right hemisphere, where we're learning to trust what comes through, even if it doesn't sound logical, even if we cannot verify its origin. Because the thing with channeling is very little of it can actually be verified. We're talking about, I'm not talking about psychic type of things. I'm talking about channeling, connecting to another person's essence, bringing forward their energy. And there really isn't instrumentation like we have to study logical linear thinking to apply to the right hemisphere. There is some research going on at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, though, which is something everybody should check out. And they are studying channeling, and they're studying human potential and the ability of humans to connect to these other realms that are beyond space and time, which is what channeling is. So there's research out there, but we are meant to be balanced with our brain hemispheres and not over-reliant on one versus another. And currently, in my opinion, we are way over-reliant on the left linear brain.
Do you think that's come in since we've become more well-educated in the past couple of 100 years, 150, 200 years? Do you believe that in ancient societies, as well as up to a couple 100 years ago, that people were less reliant on the linear thinking side of the brain and more intuitive? And we've learned to shut that down?
Probably so. Yeah, I think there's a number of factors that nudge us into turning off or shutting down that side of ourselves. And certainly that can be one of them.
Mhm. I agree. What's your process, Stephanie? Do you meditate for an hour first? What do you do? And are you coherent? Are you awake? Are you recording? What's your process when you're working with a client?
I like to think I'm coherent.
Well, some people, record it because they don't remember it
Oh,
when
okay.
they're channeling. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big fan of the heart math work and creating coherence between brain waves and heart energy. So there are practices, and they're very, very simple heart coherence practices that I use to prepare myself for a session or to channel even for myself.
Can you give us an example of one of them that
Oh,
you do?
sure. There's literally a 2-minute method where you drop in, you close your eyes, you connect to your heart. You imagine yourself breathing in and out through your heart. So inhale, coming in through the heart, exhale, going out the back of the heart. You breathe like that for a short bit. And then you conjure a feeling of love, of positive regard, of care, deep caring. And for me, that will often surface with one of my dogs in my imagining, or one of my kids, or something that I'm feeling really good and loving towards. And you bask in that as you breathe, and it actually calibrates and adjusts the brain waves, the heart rhythms, to come into coherence. And coherence is that place where you're not wasting energy, where your mind isn't racing and your heart isn't beating fast, but everything is coming into ease and flow. That's the place from which to channel. In my opinion, the best place from which to channel. So that's a really quick practice that anyone can do, and it's on their website, heartmath.org. And I also have tons of things that I do that I call radical self-care that keep me as a clear channel. And these are things that bring me joy and pleasure: time outside, time in my garden, talking to my plants, seeing what beautiful things grew overnight, which always seems magical and miraculous to me, how nature just knows and takes care of herself. Time with my dogs, meaningful friendships and deep conversations, dark chocolate, not kidding. That is that is self-care for me.
I love it.
So if we know what brings us to a place of joy and lightness, that's the place that I channel from, because that's what channeling is to me. This delightful, beautiful effervescence, connection to spirit, which is meant to be, I believe, meant to be joyful and light, to bring us greater ease and carry us on our journeys.
I agree. Well said. Concur on everything, because spirit's pure love and joy, and we're here to create a life of joy.
Yeah.
And when we're feeling something bad, we're in fear, which is a low vibration, and spirit doesn't communicate on the I feel crappy channels.
Right.
Vibration's too low.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I completely agree with you on that. When you do your channeling with a client, do you just turn it on and off? Is it just a flow that continues for the whole time that you're with the client? It's just like somebody else just joined the conversation. What does that look like?
Yeah. I would say that when I'm in a session, I'm connected really fully the whole time. So while my clients are talking to me about whatever 3-dimensional stuff they're struggling with, I am hearing their guides tell me, ask them about this. Make sure you get clear about that. Tune into this part, make a note of that. So I'm getting a lot of support and guidance in what I need to tune into when I do go into the channeling state, so that it can support them in the highest way. And when the session is complete, So am I. I close that, portal, if you will. I don't want to be visited by my clients, ancestors while I'm choosing cereal in the grocery store. So,
I love
so
that.
I think that boundaries are kind of essential in all relationships, human and more than human.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you hear about these. What's the difference to you between a psychic and a medium?
How well, I think that the mainstream media has done such a job on the psychic stuff, right? Because when someone hears psychic, they think of um, being visited at all times by those on the other side who want to tell you three-dimensional specific things, great Aunt Sally's favorite scarf color, and different details like that. Or making predictions is also how the mainstream media has focused, I think, on a lot of psychics. So, but in my world, what I've come to understand, and I would love to hear your definitions too, because we all do have different ones. But mediumship is in my understanding, is connecting to those on the other side, ancestors and loved ones who have crossed over. Channeling is connecting really to any energy. So it can be souls that are here on the planet with us right now, which is a lot of what I channel. And as well as channeling souls on the other side through the dimension of how they may have expressed in personality and what they have to share. Channeling trees, plants, animals, relationship situations and circumstances. And psychic, I want to hear your definition, because I still sometimes struggle with how that is defined and what people like to use for that.
I think they're all related. And my belief, and it's been my experience, that once we connect with spirit, you can do it all. I think it's interesting how we have the pet psychics and we have the mediums that only talk to dead people, and the medical intuitives and whatever, the people that are predicting the future. As far as the future goes, my take on that and my experience in doing this for 30 years is I can tell you when I'm getting at this moment in time. And then there are a bazillion variables that come in to affect an outcome. So it may be different this afternoon. It may be different tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. All I can give you is what I'm getting at this moment. And so I always say the future events are fluid. Is there a percentage of probability that this could happen? Yes. And then there are a bazillion ways to interpret the information that we get, whether it's about future events or what grandma's saying or whatever. I too say not only can anybody do this, but when we're connected to a spirit, it doesn't matter whether it's attached to a body or not, because every spirit has a frequency that they keep throughout all their lives. So it's like you're turning into 94.7 to connect with your grandmother. And even though your grandmother is reincarnated, she's still got that same frequency. She's playing a different role in all these different lifetimes. So I don't really define them. I know some people get all wound up about, no, I'm a medium, no, I'm a channel, no, I think it's all the same thing.
I love that. Thank you for liberating this.
Yeah. I don't get wound up. Well, the other thing too is I am really persnickety about ethics in doing this. And I don't go around scanning people. I do a lot of medical, intuitive, and energetic healing work. I'm not going to scan somebody without their permission. And if they want me to scan their relative, well, I'm going to telepathically ask that relative spirit that's attached to their body and they're alive. I'm going to ask them for permission to scan them. Likewise, you hear these TV shows, you hear about these TV shows where there's some psychic driving through McDonald's and going, your dead grandma's behind you and she wants you to get your left ankle checked out because, you've heard it. And but I think that's an invasion of their privacy. I'm not led to do that. My guess is you probably aren't either. And a lot of that is for the entertainment value that the people that are doing those shows, producing those shows, it's entertaining to watch it. Is it something I do? Never. How about you?
Yes, no, I couldn't agree more. In fact, when I'm teaching channeling, which I love to do, it's the foundational stuff we talk about. Never read someone without asking them if you have permission to do so. And if something comes through, because we can't always control, right, when some information or energy is going to come through, that does not mean you go share it either, because we can cause a lot of confusion and chaos by just spouting off, I sense this about you, or I just received a message around that. I don't believe in doing that either. I think having ethics is enormously important. I think following through with clear boundaries is enormously important. Asking permission. This is all what contributes to the high clarity of channeling that comes through. So I think it's appreciated by spirit and humans alike to hold that integrity.
I agree 100%. You were a speech pathologist. Are you still doing that?
No.
Okay. Tell us how that has helped you on your journey in doing what you're doing now. Certainly, as I mentioned just a minute ago, whatever information we get is open to interpretation. And I always suggest to people that call into my show or my clients, I always say, okay, be open to how that peacock's going to show up. You may see a picture, you may see a piece of jewelry, you may see an actual peacock, you may see one painted on the side of a van. But how does the speech pathology background, or does it, intersect with what you're doing now?
Well, since it's a clinical pursuit, it's very left brain, right?
Right.
So, and I enjoyed that. Yeah, I really like my left hemisphere.
Good to know.
Yes. So I had just incredibly amazing experiences with my patients. I worked in the medical speech pathology arena, and I would work with patients who had traumatic brain injuries, patients who had strokes. I worked with teeny tiny newborn babies who were just learning to orally feed, because a lot of speech therapy is about basically the neck up, anything to do with swallowing, anything to do with speech and language, anything to do with cognition. This is all what's covered in speech pathology. So I had a very robust career with a lot of wonderful experiences. And some of those many actually allowed me to use my intuition. When a patient loses the ability to communicate, there is a lot that you have to pull in from their facial expression, body language, nonverbal cues, and also intuit of what, just what you're sensing, the energy of the moment, what they're trying to communicate, what their needs might be. So speech pathology was such a great arena for me to really hone that intuition and create such beautiful relationships with my clients who sometimes did not regain the ability to verbally communicate or to have clear thinking. But I found ways to stay connected to them anyways because of these intuitive abilities and heart-centered communication. So I feel like probably in most any profession, there's space for us to go deeper into our abilities to intuit things. And where we disconnect is mostly in relation to trusting ourselves.
Interesting. And I'm thinking, well, you had all that practice talking to all those trees that led to you doing this. Seriously, to being able to pay attention to those thoughts that were coming into your head, and you had validation for the guidance that you were getting, and you learned to trust that. And so that, I believe, was an integral part of all of that. And when I get information coming into my head, I call those divine downloads. But I know what you're talking about, because I'm hearing you and I'm going, whoa, that's because she talked to all those trees when she was a kid, which is funny. Okay. Can people lay new brain pathways? And when you and I both teach people around the world how to do what we do, is that what's happening when they're developing those skills? Talk to us about the medical side of laying down brain pathways, and then talk to us about how that intersects with what we do when we teach people how to do this work that we do.
Yeah, well, I love this question. Yes, we are always capable of creating new brain pathways. This has been shown in literature and studies that even much older people can still create new pathways. There's something called brain plasticity, and it relates to that exact ability. How can the brain, if an area of it has been damaged or the tissue is destroyed or dead, how can it reroute itself? And that's the beauty of speech pathology, is that we're trained in finding those alternate routes so that the patient can once again learn either to communicate the way that they used to, but by using different means, or you learn how to communicate in other sorts of ways. But from what I understand, there is no end point to that. It's like we can, that whole, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's a lie. You can. Dogs and people can always learn and always repattern their neurons and the synapses and the neural connections that happen in the brain. So you just have to know where to go, what you're doing, find the specialists that understand this and practice. The brain is kind of like, it's like working out any other muscle of the body. You can improve the way you're thinking, how quickly you're thinking, how easily you're able to access words, information. And yeah, my best guess is that learning to channel, learning to do readings, learning to connect intuitively is, of course, laying new pathways in the brain, because it's not something that many of us have done throughout the duration of our lives. It's almost never something that we're encouraged to develop. For some people that's different, but most of the people I know, they've not been encouraged to develop that. So when we go in as adults or adolescents and we try to develop a new skill, that is what we're doing. We are asking the brain to show up in different ways. We're asking certain areas to pipe down, right? The left brain, I am asking it to settle down and transfer power, receptivity over to the right side so that I can receive the messages. Then the left side helps me integrate it, helps me with the language, helps me with the cohesion of it so that I can deliver it in a manner that makes sense. And that's how I think it occurs. We still need more research, but that's my best understanding.
I'm going to have Dr. Daniel Amen on the show in a couple of weeks, and he's a psychiatrist who's scanned more brains than anybody on the planet, I think. And he's come up with what's called a spirit spot in the brain. There's a portion of the brain that's developed, and in people like you and like me who've developed these skills. And I've had a brain scan done at his clinic. So I'm going to be quizzing him a lot about the spirit spot in the brain. And I told him he could use my scans, on the show. And I'm going to be talking to him a lot about the neural pathways that we lay down. When something resonates with us, a lot of times, even people that haven't been trained to do what you and I do, the hair on the back of our necks will stand up, or the hair on our arms, or we'll get goosebumps or chill bumps. They call them chill bumps down here in the deep South, darling. What's happening, do you think?
From like a physiologic perspective, I don't know, but that's how I feel it is through whooshes. I call them just chill bumps all down my body when something is what I'm deeply resonant or what I'm meant to pay really close attention to and ask for a little bit more information around. So my best guess would be that for me, it's more than okay to receive that as a signal from spirit. It's also affirmation. Before I channel, I check in and I ask my team members if they're here. So one of the beings that helps me channel is my best friend who's on the other side. She's the person who taught me how to channel. And so I'll say, Jen, are you here? And right now, woof, all down my body, I can feel her presence. You might have even felt it in your body because that's how strong she is. So this is how.
I heard yes.
Okay.
I heard a yes in my head. Divine download.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it feels to me like I believe we can decide what we're comfortable with our spirit team. Is it something that you're willing to experience on or in the physical body? These are some ways to do it. Like you said, the hair on the back of your neck. Some people will feel a flutter in their belly. Some people will feel a quickening in their heart. Some people will feel, there's endless options here. And then if we're not comfortable with some kind of a physical presence or affirmation, then we can figure out with our team what we are comfortable with. Like for you, it might be the word yes. Or it might be that you see someone in your mind's eye nodding their head or giving a thumbs up, or you hear a whisper. There's lots of ways to have that type of affirmation. But how that actually happens, don't know.
Well, it's been my experience that we're going to receive information initially in the way that we learn. I'm a visual learner. So I'm going to get information visually. I see all these wild things, and I'm an inventor of surgical devices. So I see a lot of procedures that emulate what I saw in the operating room for all of those years. And then I'm kinesthetic right behind it. So I'll get those feelings. I'll see things. I'll feel things. I'll hear things. I'll get divine downloads. I'll smell things. But I've been doing it a long time with, God, who knows how many tens of thousands, maybe even more of clients. What I think's happening when we get those goosebumps is we have the density in our body is a different vibration when our spirit's attached to our body than spirit without a body. And so that difference in frequency, the body picks it up. Kind of like when we go into a cold room, we'll get chill bumps. Well, the body's picking up, okay, there's a difference in the vibration and perhaps the temperature as well. There are lots of people throughout the ages that have said if there are spirits in the room, it feels cold. Well, they don't have the density of the body with the temperature that we all have as humans. I find it fascinating when that happens, and pretty much everybody experiences that. And those of us that have heard about it will say, oh, yeah, we'll hear someone will say, oh, well, I got goosebumps from that. We just know that means, okay, that's validation from spirit when that happens. When you mentioned that your friend was able to communicate with your mom when she wasn't able to communicate verbally anymore. How did that help you navigate her care? And also, how was that emotionally and spiritually for you?
Emotionally and spiritually, it was incredibly healing because I was pretty much focused on what I was losing with my mom and not what we still had to experience together. So, and that's the beauty of channeling or being channeled for, is you get to go beyond what that relationship has always been. And I got to see what capacity it could still hold. So I learned through that process that I was desperately trying to control a lot of things about my mom's journey and the way that she, not just, keeping her safe, but also almost narrowing her, how she could potentially communicate with me, which was not something I wanted to do. I wanted whatever expression she could access to be something that I could understand and respond to appropriately. So that was kind of like a new learning, even though that was my clinical background and I could apply that to any client or patient I saw. It was different with my mom. There's the mother-daughter relationship is complicated. And so it allowed for us to be in silence together in a much more comfortable way. It allowed for us to laugh a lot more at nothing. Like there didn't even have to be something funny and we could just bust out laughing because there's so much intensity in her journey and in just in navigating life in general within the context of a society that demands that everybody communicate and display their personalities in similar ways. So I learned a tremendous amount about assisting with clearing the path so she could be who she was and not beholden to what I wanted or needed or expected from her. And I could listen with better discernment to the subtlety of her communication and pick up on when I should just shut up, when I should just go along with what her reality was, which is something I highly recommend you do with anyone, really, that has an injury or that isn't able to orient to what is reality, whatever that means. Because what I knew to be the most important thing was to stay connected to my mom and not to correct her or to reorient her or to waste time and breath and resources and energy like teaching her things. That ship had sailed, and now I just wanted to be part of her journey in whatever way I could.
Oh, that's lovely. Let's change directions for a minute. Have you ever used a pendulum?
Yeah.
And do you use one now? Do you teach your students to use one? Tell us about, isn't that pretty? Tell us about that. How do they work and how do you use them?
Yeah, I do use one to teach. I learned to channel with a pendulum. My mentor taught us how to get yes and no answers using a pendulum. Then she taught us how to use a letter grid. It's not a Ouija board. People sometimes get a little bit, wonky about that, and I understand. It's just a letter grid to spell out words, phrases, the names of our guides, the names of ancestors who are there with us, answers to questions that we might have. I find the pendulum to be a fantastic tool for a couple reasons. One, it really weeds out those who are not committed to practice because it requires such an intense level of focus and attention that it can be exhausting. However, the more you practice, the more clear the answers come and the more accuracy you generally have and the more excited you get. And that is what I love about watching my class participants. In the beginning, they're like, this thing isn't going to move. Oh my gosh, it's moving. And then they start to get the answers. And then they check their, because I teach them how to check your accuracy for the answers. And it's a thrill. You can basically program your pendulum to be whatever source of information you want. You can ask for the information to be coming from the perspective of your higher self. You can ask for it to be coming from an ancestor or loved one on the other side. You can ask for your spirit guides to be what is moving and guiding the pendulum. So there's really endless opportunities that you can experiment with and play with to use it as a tool to support you in your journey and making decisions and understanding yourself better. Sometimes for doing work or getting answers on behalf of somebody else. There's lots and lots to explore.
How does one choose a pendulum that's going to be best suited to them and what they want to use it for?
It must be very pretty.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Well, that's always a good gauge. Hilarious. Do you have more than one or do you have one that you use most of the time?
Yeah, I have many because I like them. And I have clients who have made pendulums for me. I'm looking for the one on my desk here. That she goes to antique stores and she repurposes pieces of jewelry and she makes these beautiful things with turquoise and metals and just incredible things. This one is also a choker that you can wear around your neck. So I'm a big fan of pendulums, but really you want them to feel good in your hand and you want to feel connected to them. Sometimes they will call to you in a new age shop. And I do think it's good to go in physically and hold them and handle them and see the weight. You want them to feel like they're pulling down a bit with gravity. You want them to have a good swing without you having to make them swing. You'll know when it's your pendulum when you hold it. You can also order them online and then go for what speaks to you in that way. and what feels attractive to you and is made from materials that you're connected with. Sometimes you can find pendulums made of wood, sacred wood. Sometimes they're made of all different types of metals and crystals. Lots of opportunities to shop.
And then how do you know is yes if it spins to the right, no as if it spins to the left with everybody?
Not with everybody. It depends. For me, that's the way it works. For some people, up and down, kind of like you'd nod your head would be a yes, and side to side, like you'd shake your head no would be a no. You establish this in the beginning so that you can learn to trust when an answer comes through that is the answer you can rely on. So for ease of teaching, I often tell people, go ahead and start with the clockwise being yes and the counterclockwise being no. If that doesn't work for you or you're not getting that consistently, let's test out other things. It's just the point is to find what will work consistently.
Have you ever had one that didn't move when you asked a question? And what does that mean to you when that happens?
Sometimes they don't move as an answer. And sometimes that means ain't none your business right now.
Oh. That's good.
Right? And sometimes it's just like undetermined, right? That information isn't presenting at the moment, and that's fine. It's not necessary. And sometimes it's a reflection of my energy might be off, and I need to put the pendulum down and go do something else and come back later.
I have a friend that uses a pendulum, and she's really good with it. She's very accurate. And we were talking about one of her kids that wanted a new job, and she asked, "Will Sonny get this job?" And the pendulum didn't move, and so nothing happened. Well, the job hadn't been created yet. So 6 or 8 months later, when the job was created and was posted on his company's HR site, then he ended up getting the job. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
That whatever the variables were that needed to come together to create this guy's job, they hadn't come together yet. And so there was just no answer. Instead, and it goes back to interpretation too. I find so much of this is interpretation, because we could have interpreted that and if she would have gotten a no, he's not going to get that job, so he doesn't need to continue to think about it. And perhaps it was that other 6 months of thinking about it, that energy that helped create the opportunity for him down the line.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Pendulums have been used, I know, since the beginning of time. And my mother and my grandmothers used to tell me that at baby showers, they would use them over the pregnant women because they didn't have any way of knowing whether it was a girl or a boy, because the sonogram technology hadn't been developed yet. And that was very common that they would do that in all kinds of cultures and religions.
Yes, true. Very true.
Yeah, I was at a baby shower last weekend. We didn't do that because they have pictures of their son who's going to be born in a couple of weeks. So that was good. All right. I can talk to you for hours on end. One last question as we're wrapping up here. Why do we incarnate?
I believe it's to get closer to unconditional love, to play out different roles, different relationships, ultimately to come back home to our divinity. And learning to love each other in some profound ways is what's going to allow for our planet to heal. So that's kind of why I think what we're up to here.
Okay. Lovely answer. How can people learn more about you and your work?
On my website, soulinsight.com.
Okay. Soulinsight.com. We'll have all of that in the show notes and lots of other information for people to learn more about you and learn more about how they can learn with you. All right, everybody, that's it for this week. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from Florida, too, where Stephanie is. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow Julie on Instagram and YouTube at Ask Julie Ryan, and like her on Facebook at Ask Julie Ryan. To schedule an appointment or submit a question,
This show is
please
for
visit
informational purposes only.
AskJulieRyan.com.
It is not intended to be medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. Please contact a licensed professional. The Ask Julie Ryan Show, Julie Ryan and all parties involved in producing, recording, and distributing it assume no responsibility for listeners' actions based on any information heard on this or any Ask Julie Ryan shows or podcasts.